Hello and welcome to A Review to a Kill, the James Bond retrospective podcast where we rewatch every Bond from Connery to Craig to review and rank each one. I'm your host, Special Agent Sedgwick, and returning for this debrief is an agent that's in talks with S.H.I.E.L.D. over a career change.
Not necessarily in talks, more like active poaching.
I mean, we have to go somewhere soon. Today, we are reviewing Quantum of Solace, the 22nd Bond outing from Eon Productions, Craig's second outing, and the most direct sequel in the series, with a title taken from a Fleming short story. Often confused for a revenge film and derailed by a writer's strike, leaving rewrites to the director and Craig himself, this movie often draws the ire of Bond fans.
Why? The revenge films are the best Bond movies.
The film premiered at the Odeon Leicester Square on the 29th of October, 2008, with Princes Harry and William in attendance. Reception for the film was mixed, with middling to positive scores. The biggest shared critiques were the hyper-editing, its underestimated villain, and its equally slept-on plot. Retrospective reviews have been much more positive, with repeat viewings and changing worldviews.
Well, yeah, I don't want to say this movie was ahead of its time.
It wasn't because we should have cared more about these things back then, but we didn't and we do now.
Right. When this movie came out, everybody hated it. This is the worst James Bond movie that I've ever seen. And I'm like, did we watch the same James Bond movie?
This is Daniel Craig's least favorite movie.
Is it?
He says so himself. Apparently he enjoyed doing Spectre more than this somehow.
Interesting. Maybe it's working with Javier Bardem.
Made for $200 million, it made $589.6 million in the box office. The film was nommed for some awards with light winnings. Produced by Babs Brock and Mike Wilson, Daniel Craig returning. Again, there's no dots or true gun barrel sequence at the start anyway. We are hit with ominous low hits from the score during the production logos though. We immediately cut, several times, to Bond driving away from White's Italian villa, directly after the final scene of Casino Royale. He's in a 2008 DBS and driving alongside Lake Garda in northern Italy.
This is probably one of my all-time favorite openings of a Bond film.
Nice.
Ever.
To clear up some later confusion, especially with Mathis, I have always taken it as he didn't finish pumping Vesper's chest and drive straight to White's. And the car model here tells us that it was at least close to a year from the car game before he came calling on White.
Yeah, you think so? You think it was about a year between?
Well, he went from 2006, summer 2006, to at least the summer of 2007 to get that 2008 model Aston.
Too true. Too true.
I like the cuts between establishing money shot wides and the claustrophobic close-ups of the action. I also enjoy, and I know people will hate me for this, the extreme close-up and rapid cuts of the fights. When done right, it heightens the anxiety for the audience. When done poorly, it leaves a confusing mess that boosts Tylenol sales. And this movie does admittedly have both.
A little bit of both. The combat was frenetic in the way it was filmed.
Or at least edited.
But if you take a minute and pay attention, it's not just a bunch of shaky cuts covering up bullshit.
Bond is being chased by goons in 2008 Alfa Romeo 159s and armed to the teeth. They fire wantonly at Bond and into traffic, killing the driver of a DAF 95. The mini lorry knocks about and shoves a huge jagged piece of metal in through Bond's door, which seemed bulletproof a minute ago.
Yeah, bulletproof's not puncture-proof.
Bond J-turn reverses to rip the snag door away, exposing himself to rounds and almost whipping in front of the lorry to crush himself. Just not the smartest way to handle this.
Bond is a fucking hammer.
He zips between two other lorries and a goon car is taken out head on. There's more collateral damage than Roger Moore. The police see this and join the fray as Bond leads his pursuers into a quarry, shot at Carrara. They whip around the precariously tight corners until the cops try to shoot a pistol. So the goons turn around and light up the cop's Land Rover Defender, which demolishes a building before rolling into the quarry, barely missing Bond on the switchback.
This whole chase scene was so well done.
That cop rolling down and almost hitting Bond but missing is like typical Bond fare.
Oh, yeah. And that is total typical Bond fare. They did that in, I can't remember what movie they did that in.
That seemed so Roger Moore-ish to me.
Yeah.
For Your Eyes Only, down the olive orchard and had like the car going down.
Yeah, right. That's what it was. For Your Eyes. Yeah. Emulate.
Just nod to at the very least. I feel like Craig's run is just a constant nod to everything that came before it.
Oh, easily. At least one or two scenes from every movie.
And yet they're just things like a cigar name on a label someone's smoking. It's not like someone shouting, hey, remember this?
Right. Or pulling out a drawer full of old movie props.
Bond grabs his weapon and shoots the final pursuer after coming alongside each other. Bond then drives through the streets of Sienna. The quarry was 100 miles south of the lake in real life, and this is another 80 miles down. But whatever.
Movie magic.
At the in real life Piazzetta della Pagliera, Bond drives into the in-universe MI6 field office in Sienna. Also, this town hosts bareback horse races in the town center twice a year, and they definitely shot the rodeo. Almost literally.
Almost literally. It reminded me of being in Spain during running of the bulls.
Inside the dark tunnels of the field office, Bond opens his boot and reveals Mr. White, bound and a little bloodied. And this is the first of 3 major boot scenes in this movie. Bond smirks, super cool and calm. It's time to get out. A quick freeze frame and a hard cut to the title sequence. The brash opening chords of Jack White and Alicia Keys' Another Way to Die strike up. The imagery leans heavy into the teal and orange favorite of the era, but dark, with shifting sands, bullet tracking, and a Bond that keeps Snap 180 firing, set to a song about an agent with paranoia. There's silhouetted girls. It's the perfect blend of modern and classic titles. They even have the Dr. No dots, because you never really can escape them.
No, the dots are quintessential Bond. I don't care. That's why they're on the posters.
In every film, they're somewhere. The titles also cheekily spoil the movie if you're clever. The Q in Quantum is stylized as a sun setting over water.
Yeah, I really enjoy this title sequence, and I know it's not your favorite Bond song.
Oh no, hell no.
But I do enjoy what Jack Black was trying to do, and he followed the notes in Homework, because it is definitely a Bond song.
It's not like Die Another Day by Madonna where you're like, I don't know where she was at, but that's not how you make a Bond song at all. That's just a Madonna song. It is a Bond song. Like, he built it off the chords that he's supposed to. It's got the Jack White flair to it, but I think that doesn't blend as well for me as it does for other people.
No, I get it.
He's got such a singular style, honestly.
I know a lot of people either love this song or hate it.
And there's no middle ground.
You're right. There's not a lot of in between.
Associate producer Andrew Noakes, production executive David Pope, returning script supervisor the unfortunately named Nikki Clapp.
Nikki Clapp.
UK production manager Janine Motter, set decor Anna Pennick, property master Barry Gibbs, just staying alive.
Really? His name is Barry Gibbs, huh?
Main titles by MK12. I like this title sequence. I do, actually. Regardless of what Carter thinks, I actually still like the title sequence. But it does have a huge flaw for me, and we'll pin that for a moment.
Okay.
First assistant director, Michael Lerman. Special effects supervisor, Chris Corbold. Visual effects by Kevin Haug. Stunt coordinator, Gary Powell. Second unit in Panama by Simon Crane. Second unit director, Dan Bradley. Edited by Michael Chassé and Richard Pearson. Director of photography, Roberto Schaefer. Production designer, Dennis Gassner. Music by David Arnold. They use his music for that new Bond reality show, by the way.
Do they really?
Another Way to Die, written by Jack White and performed by Jack White and Alicia Keys. It has plenty of fans, like Carter. It's hard to say it's a bad song, but I still hate it. Even as a radio song, it would just be okay for me. And as a Bond song, it just doesn't fit for me at all, at least with this film and what this film is trying to say. The chorus kills it for me. Even for what I do like about the song, as soon as we get to the chorus, it just loses all harmony and becomes grating screaming.
Yeah, no, I get it. I can see it. And I understand why you would say that. Jack White applied a little jazz theory to a Bond song, and I appreciate that. It was definitely not an easy task to perform, I guarantee you that. To even put out something that would be even remotely radio playable, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, come on. He has Seven Nation Army and like 20,000 other hits. He knows radio playable. Executive producers Anthony Way and Callum McDougall. Written by Paul Haggis and Purvis and Wade. Produced by Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. Directed by Mark Forster. Forster previously directed Monsters Ball, Finding Neverland, and the criminally underrated Stranger Than Fiction, and The Kite Runner. The guy is a good director who focuses on the duality of man through the overcoming of emotional trauma, often for a pair of protagonists on opposite sides of a spectrum. something that will definitely be a factor in this movie as well.
Not just a good director, but a great director, considering that 70% of his movies have won Oscars.
You know, I wouldn't disagree with that statement at all. I think he's a great director also, and I think this one's a secret hit.
It is.
Massively underappreciated. And if you haven't seen Stranger Than Fiction, go do yourself a favor.
Go watch it. This movie is definitely a strong character study of the archetypes in the Bond universe.
That is putting it lightly, for once. That's the crazy thing is this is probably one of, if not the deepest Bond movie of all time. And we shit on it.
Yeah.
When we hard cut back to the movie, it's again intercut back and forth between Bond plopping White down for interrogation and inserts of the horse race outside. Bond tells White not to bleed to death and walks over to M, who asks Bond when the last time he slept was. This will also be a recurring theme. There's many in this movie people so easily dismiss, but probably the main theme for Bond in this movie, and that's, is he okay? Shown by his lack of sleep.
Right. It's the reoccurring theme of, is he okay? Which, would lead me to believe that this was a shorter time between then and now, the end of Casino Royale and now. But a year seems about right. He still wouldn't be okay after a year.
Yeah, I was about to say, dude, do you remember me after Karen?
Yeah.
I wasn't okay after a year.
Oh, yeah.
She informs Bond that Vesper's kidnapped boyfriend's body washed up in Morocco, or at least they're supposed to think that he did. But after a DNA test they did, they found out it wasn't him. The DNA came from a lock of hair in Vesper's apartment, and Bond wouldn't have thought Vesper for the sentimental type. And M says, well, we never really know anyone, do we? M turns her back for a moment, and Bond pockets the photo of the man, which represents a door to James Bond that could open up to an entire new path for him should he so choose to enter. And that's the point of this movie. It isn't a revenge film, it's an anti-revenge film. But we'll have to let the film elaborate on that.
We do.
They even immediately plant the seeds by having M say she needs to know she can trust him, and he says, and you don't. Well, it'd be a pretty cold bastard who didn't want revenge. Yeah, but Bond is a pretty cold bastard. Remember Solange? Also, the job is done, the bitch is dead. I mean, I know what they're doing here, but it ends up being a little bit of a character retread for both of them.
A little bit of a character retread. We already know Bond's a cold bastard.
But we gotta set up that trust theme for later.
Right.
Bond reminds her his main lesson from the last movie, the big picture, and swigs his scotch. You think she stepped up from Jack Daniels yet?
No. M drinks Jack Daniels.
All jokes aside, he loved Vesper, and her ghost will haunt him to the end. But he's already made his peace to move on with the job. And while this movie is an exercise in testing that resolve in his initial grief, he also shouldn't be getting pushed from the few sources he's supposed to expect support.
This is true. But you're in the spy game. You don't have any fucking support.
It's a good way to ostracize people, not prevent them from feeling ostracized.
Yeah, I don't know. Nature of the biz?
I guess. For me, it's a glitch in the trust theme that they push so much later on.
It is kind of a glitch in the trust theme, but again, you're in the spy business. Who do you trust?
Hubba, hubba, hubba. Money, money, money. Who do you trust?
Shit.
Bond still seethes at Vesper's name, offering another tell for the audience that he is still teetering on revenge and the dark path it leads. Bond and M go to White to question him, and White just smiles. He'd wanted to meet Bond formally, having heard so much about him from Vesper. M threatens torture, causing White to crack up laughing. He's amazed they don't really know anything about his organization. The British government hasn't the faintest creative notion that they even exist. Well, they do now, M says, and they're quick learners.
This is probably one of my favorite scenes in all of spy movie-dom. This is such a good scene. Because Mr. White is like, we're so fucking paranoid, and you guys don't even know we fucking exist. But this was kind of breaking for me, because as we find out later on, they were so paranoid that they should know what they know.
Why? Because they have bodyguards planted in there who maybe can hope to hear some pertinent stuff to pass on here and there?
I don't know.
It's not like they have access to anything. They have to get lucky and hope that maybe they'll hear some uncoded talk between their superiors, which around Bond is probably far more likely than not.
I would have to think that wasn't their only man on the inside, you know?
I always find that bullshit in movies when it's like all of a sudden the lieutenant's like a bad guy the whole time. Like, oh, wow. You've just been in here 30 years waiting for this, huh? For me, this scene is like the equivalent of that scene in The Dark Knight Rises where Ben Mendelsohn's character is just like, I'm in control, blah, 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 blah. And Bane just doesn't even say anything, just stops and slowly just puts his hand upside down on his shoulder. Just this light resting of his hand on his shoulder. Do you really feel in control?
Right?
That guy knew right then and there that if he breathed funny, he'd get his neck snapped off.
Yes.
And he had no power, no matter what he thought. And that's this scene right here. That's White talking to them. Do you really feel in control here?
Yeah. Yeah.
White says the first thing to know about them is that they have people everywhere. He looks at M's personal bodyguard, Mitchell, played by Glenn Foster, and asks, am I right? On command, Mitchell draws and kills the other guard before firing at M, hitting the IV stand in front of her by sheer luck.
Was it luck or did Bond push it in the way?
First off, I've always heard the ding of the metal.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the spark, but I have slowed it down a lot, and you can actually see the bullet hitting that thing. It seems like she kicks it when she falls backwards from the gunshot fear. Bond was immediately flinging the chair, though, so I don't know if he even shoved her. I've gotten this out of like the 12 times that I've watched it that she fell in fear.
Well, like I said, it's the frenetic pacing of the action scenes. It's like it all happens so fucking fast.
It's a defense thing. A lot of people hit the ground when you hear gunshots.
Yeah.
Bond flings his chair at Mitchell, and they wrestle for the gun, causing White to get shot again on accident. Mitchell kicks Bond away, grabs his gun, and breaks for it. Bond turns to see M running away and White motionless on the floor.
I was just going to say, I like how Bond's first instinct was to look after Mum.
They cut to the race, then to the chase, as Bond follows Mitchell through the tunnels and into a water retention area. Bond does some sweet platforming here. Again, some people don't like the quick cuts, but for me, it adds to the tension. I'm also playing a bit of catch-up in the chase, in kind of a good way.
The visual allegory of the horse race and the chase through the tunnels is very well executed. The intercutting between the two of them is masterful, and I like the way that Bond has picked up some parkour skills in the last year or two.
I love that. I love how they went out of their way to show, like, he's definitely learned to try and make some of those parkour jumps.
Right.
After that last chase, which is like this Bond is constantly showing something the opposite of the last 40 years of Bond, and that's that he's always learning from his mistakes and his failures. And I love it.
Correct.
Other Bond couldn't check his corners in 40 years.
Yeah.
Bond plows through support structures underground and is just generally destructive in his singular focus. They crawl up to the surface in the middle of the crowd. Bond chases Mitchell, who turns and blind fires into the crowd, killing a blonde woman who was just there on a blind date that she didn't even want to go out on, but she did it to shut her friend Tiffany up.
Oh, I thought I was just an American tourist, but a victim of gun violence because, America.
Bond chases Mitchell into a piazza and onto the actual rooftops of Sienna. No studio trickery, save precautions to preserve the rooftops from filming.
Yeah?
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
The chase along the tiles is spectacular. The tiles breaking, the huge leaps of faith, the high pace of the actors' efforts. Eat your heart out, Diamonds Are Forever and Spy Who Loved Me.
Wasn't this chase very Hitchcockian, this whole chase scene? It reminded me of Vertigo.
So this movie is supposedly riddled with Hitchcock references, but other than this and the prop plane dogfight, I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
But yes, this one and that plane sequence later are definitely Hitchcockian nods.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mitchell fires at Bond, who almost slides off the tiles, having to jump at the last moment for a balcony across the alley. Definitely giving himself a mild concussion when he hit his fucking head against the building so hard on landing. Ouch. Like I feel the impact of that every goddamn time I see it.
Oh, the stunts in this were visceral. I mean, I could feel all of them.
His head whips into that stone wall and off of it. Like, oh my God.
I would imagine he had a concussion and they had to stop filming for a day or two.
Are you kidding? Easy.
Yeah.
It's probably the most brutal head hit that Bond has taken on screen, period. And it looked like it was real.
Yes.
Like a Tom Cruise leg jump type thing, if you know what I mean.
Like a Matthew Modine getting hit with a wooden barrel in the back of the head type thing.
To keep up with Mitchell, Bond has to balcony hop and almost knocks himself out on a table when it collapses under his weight and smacks him in the head. Again. Jesus, this man probably can't see straight, but his drive to get Mitchell is unstoppable. He doesn't have time to bleed.
No, Bond is a hammer.
He's a sexual tyrannosaurus. Bond jumps on a bus and over to the other side of the alley again. He starts climbing a pipe, and this should really give Mitchell a good lead, but he's not too far ahead after all that, actually.
No, not after the bus and the shortcut and the waiting around.
Falls and climbing up the pipe.
The slight walk on the ledge, climbing up the pipe, and there he is.
Mitchell dives into the crumbling stairwell of a belfry and fires at Bond when he enters. Bond lands drawn, but Mitchell runs up, so Bond rings the bells and ascends. Mitchell jumps him, and they do some gun fu before falling off the belfry and through the panoramic roof of the under-construction building next door. The chase is trying so hard to recapture some magic from the Casino Royale parkour chase, but in my opinion, it fails at that.
No, I like this because it's a different kind of chase. The end of Vertigo. You know, the two guys fighting and falling and falling and fighting.
Yeah, I didn't mean that. I just meant like the more parkour stuff. I like that he learned it, but I also kind of felt like they were trying to like recapture that magic in this chase. I do like the more Hitchcockian nods. I didn't like the parts where it felt like they were trying to ape Casino Royale chase again.
Yeah.
That's the parts I didn't like of this chase. The cuts with the race were great. The rooftop stuff was amazing. Everything after the rooftops. But everything before that, like through the sewers, for me, was kind of like my least favorite moments of this chase. I like that he learned. I just don't like that as the people making the movie.
They tried to force it.
Yeah, it felt very forced. Bond and Mitchell turn CG and land on a painter's platform. But it's actually not as bad as Die Another Day and definitely not held on near as long. It's a half a second, so it's very forgivable.
It's very forgivable and barely noticeable.
Bond's gun falls to the floor and Mitchell's a few platforms down when Bond pulls the platform from under Mitchell. As Mitch falls, he's caught on a pulley rope and a giant pane of glass falls over Bond, so Bond dives for the other end of the pulley rope. Shit continues to get destroyed. They swing around, up and down, and into each other. Bond beats Mitchell a bit before a falling platform catches their ropes and rockets them both into what remains of the glass roof. Bond's leg gets tangled up and somehow didn't pull his leg out, almost falling to the ground.
Right.
If you fall that far and your momentum is arrested completely suddenly, ask Gwen Stacy how that works out.
Right.
Mitchell Mario hops the platforms to get his gun, and Bond dangles upside down at the bottom, at the mercy of the swinging pulley, grasping at his gun with his fingertips as he passes. Mitchell gets to his gun just as Bond comes around one last time, grabs his gun, and pulls himself up to fire a single shot.
Oh, laser beam accuracy. It's a wonder he didn't cut his fingertips on all that broken glass.
Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
Bond walks back to the field office, and we see White is gone. Any chance of a revenge path is formally erased right here with that look on his face.
Yeah.
They just gave him a greater purpose and a much more disrespectful challenge. They came into his home, insulted him, and then attacked his mum. And you know he won't let this slide when you know who this Bond is. It's kind of twisting the "you knew I wasn't going to let this slide when I knew you were you" line. Cutting to London, we see Bond arriving at Mitchell's flat to find M wrecked. Mitchell worked for them for 8 years, 5 as her personal bodyguard. She's found Christmas presents that she'd given the man around his flat, and Bond had to kill the man, just like the bomb maker.
M is positively shook in this scene.
They really needed to question this guy too. When someone says they've got people everywhere, it's supposed to be hyperbole. Florists use the expression. They aren't supposed to have someone working inside the bloody room.
It's also one of my favorite lines. It's awesome.
M rightfully wants to know who these people are and how they became so prolific without ever even being noticed. Rory Kinnear's version of Tanner then makes his appearance. He gives more of a rundown on Mitchell when a forensics tech, played by Brandon O'Hay, grabs them to show them that Mitchell had a marked bill previously slipped into Lashif's money laundering operations. M says, "Cute, but at the rate money changes hands, you might find a marked tenner in my wallet." And Rufus Wright's treasury agent says, "Yes, that's true. But this other random guy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, that has nothing to do with anything was just tagged with a whole stack from the same series," which really only proves that that guy was paid out by Lashif at some point during the whole time he was being monitored. And this guy could have just randomly gotten a tenner.
Yeah, it doesn't really prove anything.
It doesn't prove anything. It doesn't connect barely at all. It doesn't even argue M's point. M's point could argue this as not being connected.
Right. It's kind of tenuous at best.
But for some reason, we're going to jump from this guy to that guy now.
Only lead we got.
Fuck it, right, I guess. I would want something more substantial if I was M. I'm okay with Bond working on hunches.
M is shook. M is going to take anything that she can get.
Fine, whatever. The man with the bills in Haiti, Edmund Slate, played by Neil Jackson, did return from Heathrow this morning and checked into the Hotel da Saline, room 325. Bond doesn't care if this is just coincidence, and neither does the plot, so we cut to Haiti.
Dun, 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 dun.
Let's bring up the location card topography. Some people hate it. It's dope. And they did a great job thematically tying them to their locales, which really helps set the tone for the location for your brain, especially if you know nothing about it.
Yeah, no, they did a fantastic job on the locations. You're probably going to tell me they were all filmed at Pinewood.
No.
But, no, good, yeah.
Quite the opposite. They filmed in like an ungodly amount of countries. Bolivia was filmed in 3 different countries.
No, they did a fantastic job.
But yes, some sets and inserts were filmed at Pinewood.
No, of course.
Bond enters the hotel and walks to Slate's room. Brave choice of pants for a man who gets bloodied so often.
He does wear light pants very often. And very tight.
It was 2008.
Skinny jeans were the thing.
If I judge him, I gotta go look in a mirror and have a talk with myself.
And I don't think he was out back then. Was he out back then?
Who out? What are you talking about? He's married to Rachel Weisz.
Oh, so he's not out now?
He's still not out, yeah. He's still, that's what it is. We're almost there. You saw that vodka commercial. Bond jimmies in the door lock and looks around before Slate bursts through the glass bedroom door with a knife. Before we continue, there's 19 cuts from start to stab that takes place over 29 seconds, and I counted all of this. That's close to a 2-second average between cuts, and nowhere near as rapid fire as people whinge. The quickest cuts are between established action, like cutting to the scissors for half a second, and then to Bond seeing them, and then a close-up of him grabbing them. But there's plenty of wides of the fight choreography that stretch that average out by getting to breathe way more than claimed by some. Now, for the shaky cam. Yes, it was overused and annoying by movies in the day, but it got popular to be overused for a reason. When done well, it involves the audience. Unfortunately, boring movies started shaking the camera insanely and when nothing was really happening, and it just made people sick and or annoyed. But here is one of the times where it's purposeful and works, capturing the visceral and raw disorientation of Bond's emotional states and drawing us in more intimately to the action. This isn't spectacle Bond. It's intimate Bond after his biggest loss. Bond at his most vulnerable ever, and we're meant to be along with him, and at least in the beginning, questioning his motives for this film.
This is, again, some of the best filmed action sequences with the frenetic pacing of the cuts. And as you said, the cuts aren't hiding anything. The cuts are part of the action.
It's not as bad as we remember.
It's not as bad as a bunch of movies.
Especially in that time.
The
Taken series would literally just wildly shake the camera while Liam Neeson's old ass was climbing a fence. I'm serious. They had to make it exciting because he's like 55 and climbing a fence.
Yeah.
Slate slashes at Bond, and Bond throws him through the bedroom door. Slate slashes wildly, and I mean wildly. So Bond beats him with a shoe, which had to be lifted from the Bourne Supremacy magazine versus knife fight.
Yes.
But for the millionth time, Bond being inspired by an amazing spy franchise makes far more sense to me than practically anything else they've stolen ideas from since North by Northwest.
Oh, yeah.
In a post-9/11 world at that, this was the style, and it made sense far more than ripping off Star Wars, blaxploitation, ninjas, and The Matrix. If you don't like it, or at least like every other passé style, forgive it for its era, there's nothing I can say to change your mind. Tosca isn't for everyone.
Clever. Tosca isn't for everyone. As I was saying, the shakes aren't put in to cover up mistakes in the action.
No.
They're there to accentuate the action.
They're there to involve you in the action.
Right.
They knock each other over, and Bond grabs the nose hair scissors. They fight back into the living room, and it's a great fight, actually. It's very fast and aggressive. I love that visceral brutality of this era. Bond throws Slate through the balcony door and stabs the man in the neck with the scissors. He then quickly stabs Slate's femoral and waits for the man to bleed out, with the face of a Chad waiting on a Call of Duty lobby to load, before going inside to quickly patch himself up.
The way that Bond just sits there and watches this dude die dispassionately, as if he's in a bit of a hurry. It's just like, just kind of wrap this up, dude.
Can you bleed out faster?
Right? This Bond is a goddamn hammer. And I know he didn't come in here with the intention of killing this guy, but he has to be a detective because he doesn't know how to take people alive.
Bond wouldn't have killed him if the guy didn't come out swinging with a knife, but he won't not defend himself either.
No, he will not defend himself, and he will always defend himself to the death.
This movie is about him learning to control that by the end, actually.
Right, yes, no, I get it.
Putting on Slate's jacket, Bond grabs Slate's keys and leaves. In the lobby, he asks if the room had messages, flashing the keys. The lobby lady gives him a briefcase left for the room, and Bond walks outside. The very second he does, a 2008 Ford Ka whips around and a woman tells Bond to get in. Bond says, what? And she says even more confidently, get in. Bond says, all right, and gets in. This is Camille Montez, played by Olga Kurylenko. Camille is one of Bond's 3 mirrors in this film and his most direct, only she's the inverted mirror of Bond. Where he is teetering on revenge, but leans into the job, eventually going the other way, she is all about revenge. It does consume her and is her only drive. She has already left her job and gone rogue.
Oh, I love this girl. She's probably my second favorite Bond girl.
In the car, she tells Bond, as Slate, that he's late. He fishes by saying he was pulled into a meeting with a friend of Mr. White, but she doesn't know the name. We then establish a goon tailing them by 8 feet on a Monteza Coda. Totally inconspicuous.
Totally, since he's like staring at them, obviously, peering over top of cars to make sure he can see them.
In fact, she notices him immediately and asks if it's his friend. He says he doesn't have any friends, and she peels out. After turning a few corners and into an alley, she stops and says, we didn't settle on a price. Without a microsecond of hesitation, Bond says, make me an offer. He's so fucking good.
He is pretty good. It's like he's had an improv class or two.
She says they can work it out later and nods at his briefcase. He opens it and hands her a dossier from the case. She asks if Dominic gave him any trouble, and James just says, no. Quick and cool. She flips through the folder, but it's all blank pages, and she asks, what the hell is this? And Bond casually says, I think someone's trying to kill you, as he reveals the case has a gun and her photo under the top padding.
I love how he stumbles into an assassination attempt.
That's one of the more believable coincidences in this franchise for me, though. He just killed a nefarious type who immediately tried to, kill him and almost had the skill to do it, so he's probably an assassin.
Probably an assassin. No, I do not doubt it.
She draws so fast to fire that she has to be trained. There was no hesitation. He luckily deflected her arm, and she fires out the window, but Dirtbike Goon hears the round. Bond jumps out of the car, and Camille hums off.
Well, it's not like she races off in that car.
And they don't pretend like she does either. That wasn't very nice, Bond grumbles, just as Dirtbike Goon rides up. Also mistaking Bond for Slate, he says, you're supposed to shoot her. Bond acts irritated and says, well, I missed, and swings his arm into the gas of the bike. On the clutch side, but the engine revs, and the bike shoots up, launching the goon in a really fucking cool bit of swagger and stunt, mixed in one. Maybe that bike has the gas on the left for all I know.
I don't know. It might have been on the left.
If you have that bike in Haiti, let us know at 1-800-WE-DON'T-GIVE-A-FUCK.com.
Yes, please address your comments to the I don't give a fuck bot.
Bond jacks the bike and rides off after Camille, and we cut to M ordering Tanner to get Bond. Tanner calls Bond and asks about Slate, to which Bond says Slate was a dead end. M says, damn it, he killed him. This is the bit of the movie that's starting to show it's an anti-revenge film. M thinks he might want revenge, and it's starting to look like he's just going around killing people. But we, as the audience, saw Slate attack Bond first. So now we start really hammering in on the theme of trust.
Right.
There's so many themes in this movie, and we just keep introducing new ones.
He's killed so many people, and instantly thinks he just went in there and killed that dude.
Well, you'd be a pretty cold bastard not to want revenge.
Well, yeah.
Cutting to Camille, she pulls up to the Haitian waterfront docks. Now, I should mention, Haiti isn't a safe place to film, so the Haitian scenes were shot in Cologne, Panama.
Haiti's not a safe place.
That's understatement of the century. Camille is greeted by the nerdiest-looking goon of all time. He is a walking punchline for this film. In the age of tech bro criminals, this guy has grown on me. But he's bald and a bad toupee named Elvis, built like Doug Jones, and will have a neck brace as well before the final insult at the end, which I'll get to.
This guy reminded me of the evil professor in Phineas and Ferb.
Elvis is played by Anatoly Taubman. He tries to stop Camille, but she slaps his hands and says, "Touch me and I'll break your face." So he doesn't do shit else.
No, he doesn't. And that's him the whole movie.
Bond drives by in the background and scoped the sitch while that was going on. Inside the doghouse, we see our villain of the film, besides the government and Bond himself, but the main antagonist.
I was about to say, the United States government's in that warehouse?
He sees Camille and freezes before donning a rat-faced grin saying, "How nice to see you." "Alive, you mean?" She fumes. But hey, at least it made him very sad that he tried to have her killed. This is Dominic Green, a modern representation of slimy corporate overlords starving the world to death for more in their safe. He's a completely greedy sociopath, but within the realm of humanity, completely normal. It's actually unsettling. He represents our real greatest evil enemies, the rich.
I really like Dominic Green as a villain because he is the perfect tech CEO villain. And had I been Camille, I would have double tapped him in his chest and put one in Elvis's dome and walked out of there.
But then you'd never get Madrano. She's singularly focused. Green is just a means to an end.
Green is just a means.
Green's cover is as an eco-capitalist, and his last name is Green, but that's about as kitsch as he gets. What's up with the names? Mr. White, Mr. Slate, Mr. Green? Where's Mr. Pink? I want to beat his ass and tell him to tip his fucking waitress.
Schmarmy motherfucker, Mr. Pink, is the reason the whole thing went wrong.
I digress. Matthew Amalric immortalizes Green for me. I know a lot of people hate this villain. I was one of you at first. I did too, not taking him as a credible threat or with a large enough vision. But now I firmly disbelieve both of those opinions. Maybe it was 15 years of growth and world change, who knows. But if the pen is mightier than the sword, then this guy is dangerous as fuck. And unlike a lot of similar situations, like Carver, for example, this guy seems like he knows how to wield it instead of constantly screwing himself. Also, the water plot might have been slept on 15 years ago, but by now, if you don't realize the biggest war we've ever fought is about to be fought over water, then you dumb as fuck.
You are dumb. We were talking about this years ago. Anyway.
They made sure Green had no deformities and went for an unsettling normalness. My point is that this guy, he's a hella underrated villain.
Totally underrated villain.
And Matthew Amalric's nuance is so ungodly realistic that if you're not watching this under the microscope, you're going to miss half of it. Because it's not stretched out to act. He's acting like a real human being. He's acting like a real fucking sociopath. And yes, we've all known a few.
And he doesn't even disguise it. I mean, he threatens to kill her right there.
Did you see the look on his face when those suits touched him at the fundraiser to congratulate him after his speech? Like he knew he couldn't escape. He couldn't just order them to get away or kill them. He had to sit there and take it.
Right.
And he had the look of an animal who just got its leg caught in a trap.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Camille tries to tell Green she was rooting a leak, but he snaps not to talk to him like he's stupid. It's unattractive. He then takes her out to the docks. He tells her there's nothing more uncomfortable than people talking behind his back, like ants under his skin. When he was 15, he had a crush on one of his mom's piano students who said nasty things about little Dom-Dom, so he grabbed an iron. He then shows Camille a body in the bay and asks if it was her mole. She says they only spoke on the phone. She plays her way out of this, but he isn't dumb.
And she's dumb for thinking he's dumb. He makes very few mistakes.
He strikes on his advantages, too.
Yes.
You know what burns more than all of your bullshit, Green says, as the camera lets us focus on her burn scars covering her back. Green continues, I always felt you were fucking me just to get to General Madrano. He swings his head over in an indicating fashion when saying this. In the bay, a Sunseeker Superhawk comes in with the deposed dictator of Bolivia, General Madrano, played by Joaquin Cosio. conveniently aboard.
Yeah, a smart agent would have been like, okay, there's my target. I've been wanting to get close, but I should probably get out of here. But a revenge-minded person is like, oh, there's my target. I gotta get as close as possible.
The problem with Camille is revenge is so much of her focus that she does not care, either now or later in the film, if she is put into a mortal situation as long as she gets a chance to squeeze that trigger first.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why she's never really a damsel in distress. Even though Bond saves her a couple of times, she's never a damsel in distress because she did not want to be saved. She didn't care if she came out or not, as long as Medrano didn't either.
Right.
Camille can't hide her mixture of excitement and anxiety. Green smirks that he'll introduce them, before the smirk instantly switches to rage as he turns, in one of many blink and you'll miss it moments peppering this movie, begging for multiple viewings.
He really does have that Patrick Bateman face swap thing in the microseconds between when characters are looking at him when they're not.
100%. I'm so glad you noticed it because it's all I could notice this time. We had the advantage of writing scripts and taking notes. We watch a scene and we pause it. We might watch it multiple times. And we definitely have way more of a chance to focus on things.
Oh yeah.
Bond approaches the gates and tells the sentry to give Camille his card, handing him a Universal Exports card. Heyo.
Shout out to the company.
And yes, I know that there's a guy sweeping 2 feet above the ground in this, but there's honestly background stuff like that in every single movie. And it's usually far worse in fight scenes with extras just knocking themselves out. Bond also scopes the cameras, continuing this Bond's tradition of learning from his mistakes. Unlike every other Bond ever, besides maybe Dalton's.
His Bond is what Craig's Bond would have been if he had more movies. I'm telling you guys that now.
Elvis takes the card and calls Bond's cell phone, and Bond uses the connection to establish a tracking line on Elvis's phone. Back with Green, who's pitching Medrano on his organization's services. Specifically, Green lets them know that here in Haiti, they've helped facilitate a coup in the government to install a more financially oppressive regime that'll play ball with the big overseas corporations, offering to do something similar for Bolivia and get Medrano back on top there. They've already begun destabilizing the region, and among many other actions and perks, have 26 countries ready to recognize Medrano's new government, which is actually crucial. Green isn't some con man. He knows what he's talking about.
This organization is very powerful. This is just to establish just how juicy Spectre is. Because let's make no mistake, this is Spectre.
They basically have a bumper sticker over their name that says, "We're not Spectre, we promise," and then it'll fall off later when the rights come.
Right, when the rights come.
But it is. Surprise, it's Spectre. You caught us. Fuck you, Kevin. Medrano asks what Green wants in return, and Green dismisses a desert, showing Medrano a spot on a Bolivian map. Medrano says this land is worthless. Oh, so you're getting a great deal. You won't find oil there, Medrano warns. But we own whatever we find, Green punctuates with a suspicious amount of confidence. So much of this movie is about misdirection, especially involving the plot.
Yeah, but I would be immediately suspicious of the man who just offered to coup my country. He just wants a worthless desert.
And the way he said, oh, well, then don't worry about it, but I'm making sure it's mine, though, I'm letting you say there's nothing there, cool, but I'm keeping what I find there, right? All right, hold up. What's going on here?
Stop right there. I am immediately suspicious about what's in that desert. What do you know that I don't know about this section of desert?
Green then inhales deeply and walks with Medrano, asking if he remembers Ernesto Montes. Medrano reflects on the man and the power he held in the day, along with Montez's hot Russian wife. Green informs the general that his old enemy's daughter works for him, or did, as they come upon Camille. Green offers her as something to sweeten the deal, just having Medrano promise to throw her overboard when finished. Camille and Medrano formally introduce, and he straight tells her he killed her family. I mean, she knows, but damn, it's cold.
Yeah, I keep wanting to call him Maduro, but that's a real man.
Who's also a villain.
Moderna, what is his name in the movie?
Medrano.
Medrano is a villain. I don't want to say your stereotypical narco villain, but he is exactly that.
Green twists to be careful what you wish for, and Camille is pulled aboard the Sunseeker. Bond sees her being taken off to a potential watery grave like Vespers, and being this Bond, and what he's been through, and is going through, doesn't even think. He just guns it and goes to save her, He can't let these men kill her. Bond ramps some pallets and skips the bike over a boat and onto another. He ditches the bike and dives onto a Haitian fishing boat with a Yamaha outboard. As Medrano heads back to his Sunseeker M4 yacht, Bond speeds over full throttle and rams the Superhawk. Goons on the M4 yacht scramble and some depart in an Avon adventure to chase down Bond. Camille stands over Medrano after the crash and draws her garter weapon, but Bond heroically jumps over to save her, knocking the gun into the bay and ruining her perfect chance she's waited her whole life for to get revenge. She wasn't a damsel in distress. Maybe she would have been killed, but she didn't care as long as she took the general with her. Bond's selfish need to find some solace in Vesper's loss caused him to dive in without thinking and ruin something for someone else, which is another one of the many recurring themes in this supposedly terrible movie. He dives with Camille onto a Riddle Marine jet boat. Hold up, I hear you saying, that's a jet boat? And although it looks like an old battered homemade fishing boat, this is actually an aluminum jet boat made by an Idaho-based company, Riddle Marine, with a much more powerful engine, customized to look like a Haitian fishing boat and called Gardien des Étoiles, meaning Guardian of the Stars in French.
Yep. And they put the name so prominently up on the side that I too had to look it up.
They take off, and Camille demands to be taken back. Bond scoffs, yeah, maybe I'll do that later. And she starts a little hand-to-hand as he tries to subdue her and pilot. She realizes aloud that Bond isn't one of Green's, and Bond queries, Dominic Green? All while they grapple. Goons catch up as Bond gets sideswiped. They fire into the Guardian, and Camille knocks a goon into the ocean when they come close for a pass. They dart around other boats, and Camille demands the wheel, but Bond denies her, telling her to just navigate, which sounds misogynistically dismissive. But they're mid-chase, and pulling a Chinese fire drill is stupid. Plus, he literally just got sideswiped because he's more focused on going as fast as he can and not getting shot than paying attention to the fishing traffic in the bay, and there's a lot of it.
Well, no, navigation is probably what you should be doing. And yes, a Chinese fire drill in the middle of a boat chase when people firing automatic weapons at you is a dumb idea.
Another Avon adventure joins the pursuit. The music is epic. Man, it would take a serious fuck-up to ruin this.
Are you foreboding, Matthew?
Well, it doesn't help that Cammie's first direction as navigator sent Bond into two small boats. Bond then rams a goon boat before coming about and ramping their outboard, causing it to explode. I'm not sure how any of that happened, and without damaging Bond's boat, which should be riddled with bullets and hit by a rando boat, but moving on.
Especially since it's made of wood, or at least disguised to be.
Camille pulls Bond down in time not to be Swiss cheese, and he never would have seen it coming. They scrape up against bigger ships, and Bond brake checks the last goon boat, causing the pursuing craft to launch onto Bond's boat, knocking Camille out cold. Now what happens next is one of the great mysteries of the universe. Many people like myself have stayed awake, and I'm not lying, at night, trying to figure this out. I've seen Reddit threads descend into madness, with us no closer to an answer than ever before. Bond takes the anchor from his boat and hooks it onto the lip of the adventurer's bow. The rope pulls out, somehow, from something, and then the adventure flips. And I can't even begin to come up with a bullshit explanation for this. There is none. They are completely non-connected events that somehow both happened. And I mean, it looks cool, but what the fuck just fucking happened?
I'm going to chalk it up to bad editing, because it's certainly bad physics.
You know, is it bad editing, or is the editor doing all he can to try and cover up the fact that this director is far more focused on the human story than the action, and has never really done action before, didn't know how to film it, or end it, or care?
I think it's a combination of all of the things we've just said. He is not an action director.
I mean, he shot Will Ferrell fighting with a lamp. That's the type of movies he made.
Right. And the fact that they missed this kind of shot in post just, left it in for the sake of the stunt. It says a lot to the action direction, because anybody who would watch that scene would have been like, what the fuck just happened?
With that somehow over, Bond motors off with an unconscious Camille. People love to complain about this movie as drab and ugly to look at, but they filmed in 8 countries and showed off each well. So much lush greens and blues here, from the beginning near White's Italian villa, and later with Mathis. Bond pulls into a dock and carries Camille to a porter, who he literally dumps Camille on without a thought or care, At least he thanked the man. Barely. After quipping that she's seasick, he follows the Elvis tracker on his phone. He steals a rusted 1988 Ford Bronco and drives off.
I thought to myself with this particular scene, how very Captain America of him.
Oh my God, right when I was drinking water, dude, that was close. Bond calls in and has Tanner run a name check on Green. The largest footprint belongs to the CEO of Green Enterprises, a utility company. Green has been doing philanthropic work and buying large tracts of land around the world for eco-preservation. Bond is sent a photo and confirms it's him, as Tanner hits a firewall, blocking the rest of the files on the man. So M calls the Americans to be let in. She's transferred to Gregory Beam, played by Hellboy, Black Widow's dad, David Harbour.
You mean Santa Claus?
He blows her off immediately, saying they have no interest in Green, while he sips champagne on a Canadair Challenger. M says, so Green's of extreme interest, and Tanner is confused. M points out that they transferred her to the South American section head, so they're obviously tracking Green, or the operator wouldn't have known to do that. That's a smart deduction.
Well, yeah, no, M is no slouch when it comes to the spy game.
She doesn't feel like a desk warmer. She feels like she was an old spy back in the old Cold War days.
Right. She does not feel like she was ever just in analytics or anything like that. M feels like she was a spy.
And this is a different M from Brosnan's M. She really is. The 4 films she did with Brosnan, the 5 she did with, and really the 3 she did with Craig. It's a different M. The M from Brosnan's era was a bean counter that hated the Cold War era spies. And you could tell by the way she talks about Christ, I miss the Cold War and the spies from it in Casino Royale that this version of M is a completely different person. She's not a bean counter who resents those people. She was one of them.
Right, exactly.
And has been far more adept in these films and less of just a desk filler like M's have tended to be compared to how sharp this one is.
Right.
Bond pulls into an airfield. We see Green boarding a Canadair Challenger, and Bond has Tanner run flight plans on the tail number. Looks like Green's going to Bregenz, Austria. M begs Bond not to kill every possible lead, and he says, "Yes, Mum, I'll do my best," before tossing the phone. Cutting back to Green, aboard the plane, and greeted by a happy Beam and unhappy Felix. The CIA is selling its non-interference in Quantum's plan for a stake in whatever oil Green has found. Green slips in, "If it's oil you want." To which Beam laughs, "Well, you didn't find diamonds down there. You've been buying a lot of piping, my dude."
I love how annoyed Jeffrey Wright looks in this entire scene.
Most of this movie. Well, think about it. It's never obviously pointed out on a lot of this movie. This is like an older movie where they don't just fucking hold your hand and hold up a sign or just say it. Like, you have to figure so much out. Felix was obviously working in some really nice European sections before, and was probably even not head, but one of the higher up agents of that area. And now he's under Beam in a shithole down here, literally doing nothing, and where everyone knows who they are. We're very obviously supposed to take it that after the debacle of Lashif and them actually not getting him because he died, he was demoted. Felix gave his money to Bond and didn't get Lashif. He got demoted. He's miserable. He's sent to hell.
And mistrusting.
And he's working under a corrupt piece of shit.
Yeah.
Beam wants to verify the find, but Green won't even admit there is one, letting their false confidence fool themselves. Green says, besides, they're getting another capitalist-friendly government in South America instead of a Marxist one giving the resources to the people. Beam is all on board. Felix looks offendedly pissed. Green shows Beam a photo of Bond from the dock surveillance, saying he has a pest. Beam tosses Felix the phone, asking if he has any idea who it is. Felix coldly looks, closes the phone, and says, "Sorry." Beam lowers his head and drops his mood. "It's James Bond," he says, looking directly and disapprovingly at Felix. "British Secret Service. Don't know how I could have missed that." Beam tested Felix, and Felix failed. Upon landing, Green departs, and Beam asks Felix if he's going to play ball or be a problem.
David Harbour is the perfect scumbag. I just enjoy him so much. He's such a good actor. And this role reminded me a lot of his role later on in Extraction.
He seemed like the perfect American government villain to me, just self-obsessed, moronic douchebag.
Yep.
Felix can't believe they want to do business with Green, and Beam says, yeah, you're right. We should only do business with nice people. Bond follows Green to the opera. The strikingly modern opera house is the Festspielhaus Bregenz at the eastern tip of Lake Constance. It's the largest floating stage in the world, and the striking eye set was the actual Tosca set for 2007.
Oh, wow. So they really went and watched a performance of Tosca, huh? That's awesome.
It's not like the horse race where they filmed something that was being separate outside of their control. Bond sneaks in the performer's entrance and ducks into a dressing room to steal a tux. He enters the lobby on the upper level and looks down at Green socializing before the show. Bond also observes the hostesses handing out hidden secret gift bags to certain listed guests that look just like the normal ones on the table above.
Except for the big Prince ribbon. I would be like, hey, so when's the Prince after party and how do I get a special invite?
And are there going to be pancakes?
Are there going to be pancakes?
After one man receives his special Tosca bag, Bond follows him to the loo. Everyone is called to seats, but in the bathroom, we see Bond pouring through the contents of the gift bag. Some gloss black folders, a Q-shaped pen of some kind, and an earpiece radio. He dons the swag and exits, revealing the unconscious quantum agent in the corner before breaking off the door handle as he walks away.
This James Bond is a thug. If he wants it, he gets it.
I just think he's a great agent because that lack of hesitation is why he keeps winning, and more believably.
It is, but that doesn't make him less of a thug.
He's gangster. He's a G. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
We then get our first of many masterful intercuts of Puccini's Tosca, currently focused on Scarpia, as we are primarily focused on Quantum and what they are up to. We then see Bond in the lighting rafters looking down at everyone, and then to this amazing insert of Elvis looking back at his fellow hench, obviously moved by the opera, just to turn back embarrassed from the look he was awarded. Elvis is so human in this moment, it's amazing. I love that insert. Bond listens into Quantum talking about how much more pipeline they need. One Quantum head asks what to do when the Americans realize they've been duped, and another member named Guy Haynes, played by Paul Ritter, says he's working on it. Bond sees a goon coming up the stairs to the catwalk, but keeps listening to the heads talk about controlling as much of a precious resource as they can. And that's when Bond pulls his highest IQ move in the series so far. He interrupts the radio chatter to say, I really think you people should find a new place to meet, causing almost every member of Quantum to stand up to exit. Where do you think you're going? He asks as he snaps photos of all of them.
Not every one of them, just the stupid ones.
Back then I thought this was bullshit, but I have a phone that could get that clear of a zoom now, and he had a Q branch, so.
Yeah.
Also, I say almost all because Mr. White is also smart. He remains with his wife who notices the people leaving, to which he brushes. Tosca isn't for everyone. Fucking brilliant. I love this sequence, and it's only trumped by the chase sequence next.
Yeah. This movie was one big, long chase sequence punctuated with deep moments of character growth.
After Bond snaps his new photos and proves them right about being fast learners against new threats, the goon comes catching up to him. Bond bangs him around and heads down. He walks 20 feet from Mr. White and never sees him, and entering the lobby, runs into Green and his men, with the music strikes rising. Scarpia's goon kills Tosca's lover, and Green sends his goons after Bond. Tosca, taking her raging revenge on Scarpia, is intercut with Bond's gunplay during his escape. Shots to stabbing, the shared theme of revenge over a murdered love. The frantic and tense nature of both dancing around each other in chaotic harmony.
This was a pretty well shot action sequence in and of itself. I mean, I like the way he does the interconnected action sequences. Those are great because it puts like a living soul into the action sequence. You know what I'm saying?
It gives you some sort of artistic parallel to have another kind of connection to.
Yeah. I mean, this might have been his first go at an action movie, but he's on to something.
Way better than we thought.
Yeah.
As Bond makes his way to the roof, he's followed by one last goon. So Bond waits beside the door and presses his gun to the man's head when he comes through. Tosca lets out a sigh of bloodied satisfaction as Bond leads the man to the edge of the roof to ask where Fikesh... Wait, that's Roger. He does hold the man over the edge by his clothing and ask him who he's working for, though. The goon judo chops, and Bond counters so that the man grabs onto Bond's sleeve. and Bond swipes the man's hand away, just as Roger did, causing the man to drop over 30 feet onto Green's car. But he's still alive, and Bond would know that the height was probably only enough to fuck him up. For life, but still.
Maybe not even for life. It's not that far, and he fell onto a car.
That part was lucky.
It wouldn't have fucked Bond up.
Bond has plot armor. That extra couple feet and onto concrete, like the give of the bonnet is what saved his back from being paralyzed.
Yeah.
Green asks if the goon is one of his, and Elvis says no. So Green says, then he shouldn't be looking at me. Green's driver, played by Carl von Malese, gets out and shoots the fallen goon, who is actually an MI6 bodyguard. We cut to M at her flat. She's drawn a bath when called by Tanner to report the identities gained from Bond's photos, including Guy Haines, special envoy to the Prime Minister. Tanner also tells her that Bond shot Haynes' bodyguard before throwing him off the roof. And this is the second major hint to the audience that what M is feeling currently is not how we should see the movie. We know that didn't happen.
Right?
But now she thinks Bond is going on a revenge bender and orders him to come in while taking her makeup off. Like a boss.
Yeah, no, she totally thinks he's gone on a revenge bender when this was the first guy Bond actually tried to take alive.
I mean, to be fair, Bond probably thought he was about to paralyze the guy, though.
Well, he wanted the guy to talk, but not go anywhere, so... Batman.
Bond rebuffs her orders, saying he has to find the men who tried to kill her, and she cancels his cards and orders his movements restricted, with alerts on his passports. But she also asks Tanner for a report on Haynes, telling him to keep mum and stay a good judge of character. You know, trust.
Trust, right?
Cutting to the airport, we see Green taking off, and at the counter, we see Bond trying to follow them to Bolivia, but his cards are declined. He leans in, and in a charming tone says, "Can you do me a favor? You're going to get a call in a minute. Tell him I'm going to Cairo."
I love how he just flirts his way out of trouble almost every time.
Hey, I've done it.
I have to. I'm not going to lie.
Come on. I was about to say, every guy has, and he's the best at it.
Oh, yeah.
We then cut to Bond on a Sunseeker Sovereign, being driven over the beautiful waters of Talamone, Italy. Mathis's home is Torre di Talamanaccio, a restored medieval tower on the coast that you can rent as a luxury holiday accommodation. Swanky digs and a nice car? He sued the hell out of the British government, didn't he?
Oh, man. Did he ever get a nice settlement? He probably didn't even have to sue.
They just threw money at him and said, please disappear.
Yeah. It was like, look, you know the game.
If we ever hear about you again, though, the next thing you'll get will be a lot more heavy. Bond knocks, and Mathis answers, asking what Bond wants. To apologize? Of course, Bond can't do that. Seeking Mathis for help is as close as Bond can give to an apology, and Mathis knows it.
Well, Mathis is the wise old G, the old bull in this situation, as it were.
On the patio, Bond asks Mathis for a passport and credit cards. Mathis understands why Bond did everything and pushes Bond to forgive Vesper. It's a very deep conversation, focused on the youthful, naive view of the world and the blinding power of love, and the overwhelming power of forgiveness. Mathis is the mirror of Bond that tries to show him the path of forgiveness. Bond convinces Mathis to join him in La Paz, Bolivia, actually shot in Panama. On the plane there, Bond is down like 12 martinis when Mathis rouses and asks him what he's drinking. Bond says, I don't know, knowing full well what it is. The bartender lists the Vesper recipe, and it's a really great moment because Bond is refusing to acknowledge Vesper even while literally getting plastered on her memory.
Right?
But this movie's stupid, right?
And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Mathis there when he invented the drink and gave it its name? Standing right there when that happened.
Bond knows what's up. Bond knows Mathis knows what's up. Bond knows that lie is bullshit. Mathis knows that lie is bullshit.
Yeah.
But Bond won't stop.
No.
He will not stop pretending.
And that's why it's always been a vodka martini.
This is also another moment where the movie focuses on Bond not sleeping and just not being generally well. Mathis offers pills that James refuses.
All sorts of pills.
And we cut to them landing in Bolivia, where Bond is met by a trench coat with a woman inside, played by Gemma Arterton.
Oh, Lord. So, I don't know, maybe I have a thing about British redheads, but damn.
Oh, that's red in a bottle, buddy.
It doesn't matter.
Fair enough, he said.
It does not matter.
This is Agent Strawberry Fields, and despite the Beatles pun, she's actually not a field agent either. She's a desk clerk from the consulate sent to turn him back around to London, or at least keep him under control until M gets there. And this is our third and final mirror of Bond in this film, the innocent mirror. They taxi to her designated hotel, and Bond takes one look at the dump and walks out. She chases him, telling he's going nowhere. So shoot me. I'd rather stay in a morgue. We are teachers on sabbatical. This fits our cover. No, it doesn't. Get in. Get in, he repeats, mirroring Camille. That scene repetition and mirroring is something that happens a lot. Yeah.
It does happen a lot. And I just love the fact that James Bond took one step into that fucking hotel and he was like, absolutely fucking not.
They taxi to the Grand Andean Hotel, and Bond walks up to the clerk, says, Hola, we are teachers on a sabbatical, and we have just won the lottery. That's so fucking great.
It is.
This hotel is actually the National Institute of Culture in Panama. It was built to be their Supreme Court. Inside the room, Bond immediately pulls the I can't find the stationery, want to help me have a look trick, and Fields, unlike Camille, falls for his charm and onto his dick at the drop of a hat.
On the drop of a hat. It was the corniest line. It didn't take anything.
He walked in the room, looked around, and said, I can't find my inhibition. Let's fuck. Even that is better than Roger Moore just sitting down next to the girl and starting to untie her shirt. Like, you know what you're here for.
Yes, that's true. It's not rapey, at the very least.
Mathis arrives to give Bond his invitation to the Green Planet party, and Bond gets back into bed with Fields, before cutting to later at the party. Green gives a speech about his eco-philanthropy, and okay, maybe he is a con man.
Oh yeah, he's a total con man.
But he's really just doing side scams for donations. There's an insanely brilliant moment after the speech when suits come up to slap and hug Green in congratulations, and he can't just bark at them to fuck off. He's mortified they're touching him. It's so nuanced, another blink and you'll miss it detail, but it fits so well with the very real established character.
His nuance, like I said, is very Patrick Bateman-esque. As soon as no one on screen is looking at it, his expression drops. It's very good.
Meanwhile, Mathis introduces Bond to his friend Carlos, a police colonel played by Fernando Guillén Cuervo. The colonel tells Bond that Mathis has told him everything about him and the police force is at his disposal. Some more nuance is the way Carlos looks at Bond here. It's brilliant. Back with Green, and we hear exposition on people spending half their paychecks to get water. There's a lot of chatter from background characters about the drought in Bolivia from this point onwards.
Well, yeah, because it's all about the water, baby.
Green is quick to use this to blame the drought on the government and its deforestation. Suits are about to open up checkbooks when Camille walks up saying, well, what about the last place you did this? And Bigwig Fat Cats ended up with the logging rights and you ended up with all the land. Green laughs nervously and brushes her off as mistaken and takes her away. You just cost me quite a bit of money. You can't put a price on integrity. I can try.
It's good, right? Well written. He's such a scumbag. I don't want to say he reminds me of a certain tech CEO who likes to shoot rockets into the sky.
That's just because that guy is such a Bond villain that all Bond villains remind you of him.
Okay, that could be true.
Bond creeps towards Green when he's made by Felix, who's seriously sour about his current sitch. Meanwhile, Camille wants to know where Medrano is, and Green is measuring if he could push her over the railing. He even tries to shove her through the old stone to make it look accidental, but it doesn't give out in time, and Bond pops up saying, "Good evening. Oh, there you are."
Mr. Bond to save the day. Even though she didn't ask for it. Well, at least he didn't jump into the water and rescue a flailing girl from a swim.
Take that, Lazenby. I had my toes in the water, you psycho. Green tells Bond to be careful with Camille. She only sleeps with you if she can get something out of it. He then tells Camille that Bond is rather tragic himself. MI6 says he's difficult to control. Nice way of saying everything he touches seems to wither and die. Bond and Camille walk off as Fields ascends the stairs. Green says Bond and Camille are both damaged goods, and Fields trips Elvis down the stairs. He loses his toupee for a moment, but gains a neck brace for the rest of the film. Fields says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." But she dead now, especially since Bond just ditched her and Mathis at the party.
Well, yeah, he took his eyes off the prize in order to rescue a girl.
Bond is still focused on finding his solace, that even with his ability to try and push it back and focus on the mission, that he's not as singularly focused this time.
Right.
There's still some drive in him that's worried about his solace.
Yeah.
His peace. And I'll say later, again, that's why it takes Bond so long to even figure out that it's not even about oil.
Well, yeah.
And that's why Green is so effective against Bond, because his head's not completely in the game yet.
Right.
Bond tells Camille to help him investigate Green's Tierra project, and Camille asks if she has a choice. Bond asks if she wants one, and she laughs that he's horribly efficient. Is that a compliment?
I don't think it was a compliment.
They drive off in a Rover and are immediately tailed by cops on Suzuki DR650s. They pull Bond over and have him pop the boot. Our second boot scene in the movie, and not the last. Bond wonders why they went straight for the boot search, but pops it. As soon as he opens it, the cops draw on Bond and tell him to get the body out. And we see Mathis, near dead in the trunk. Another life Bond got killed. Another life he put in danger and failed to protect. This is brilliant storytelling.
Yeah.
In a singular moment and without being told shit, we know Carlos betrayed Mathis and set him up to get Bond in the same way Mathis got Lashif's goon in the last movie. We know Carlos is on Green's side.
Yep, in a singular moment.
The cops go to shoot Bond, and Bond uses Mathis as a meat shield before wrestling the gun away and shooting the two cops. Bond leans over Mathis with his hands over Mathis's chest, just like Vesper. Mathis gasps for Bond to stay with him as he dies. Bond cradles Mathis, again, like Vesper. He's devastated and racked with guilt. Bond jokes about Mathis's cover name, and Mathis begs Bond to forgive Vesper, to forgive himself, the way Mathis forgives Bond, for even this. The film slows to where the only thing moving forward is the music as Mathis dies. Bond takes 2 seconds and hucks Mathis's body into a dumpster and steals his cash. Is this how you treat your friends? He wouldn't care, Bond says, feigning his armor. But his words tremble. His face looks devastated. He's hiding his grief, his guilt, for another life he put in danger and failed to save. But also, he isn't lying. This is something Mathis would and has done to other people.
Right?
And he's dead. Burials aren't for the dead.
Yeah.
They're for the living to let go.
Yeah.
We crossfade to Bond and Camille driving into the desert. It's a quick insert to show what they're doing, but it's more to show Camille sleeping and Bond not. Then a quick cut to Tanner telling M, the Home Secretary, wants her, that Mathis was shot dead and that the police claim it was Bond. We cut to Bond and Camille in the Bolivian desert, actually Baja Cali, Mexico. They rent an old Douglas DC-3. The director wanted this old prop plane as a tip to Hitchcock. When Camille asks what Bond paid for it, Bond responds, well, he wanted you, but I left him the car as collateral, and he'll make much more when he sells us out. They take off, and the mechanic he bought the plane from is already on the phone.
As soon as it's on the taxiway, he's dialing.
In the air, she shows him where to go, and he says he's been informed she's Bolivian Secret Service. Or, used to be. But then she infiltrated Green's organization by having sex with him. She asks if that offends him, and he laughs, no, not in the slightest. She asks why Bond wants Green, and he says, amongst other things, he tried to kill someone that he knows. And she asks if it was a woman, and Bond laughs again. Yes, but not what you think. Your mother, she likes to think so.
She likes to think so. And I like how this Bond doesn't have any of the hang-up Sean Connery's Bond does.
Yeah, he doesn't give a fuck. Why would I be bothered by that? I'm proud of you. It's exactly how I would do it. They establish the sinkholes pockmarking the area underneath, and their plane gets lit up from above. An Aermacchi SF-260TP is zipping around and firing at them dogfight style. Bond tries to emergency land, but has to pull up or run into the mountains. He does his best to swing the big old bird back and forth through the valleys, but the other plane just easily watches from above and dives in for another shot. They turn Bond's plane into Swiss cheese and fuck up an engine. Bond full throttles the busted engine and creates a smoke screen low in the valley. You'd think he'd pull up real quick and pull a Will Smith from Independence Day. But no, he just kind of continues flying his crippled old plane around until the bad guy just decides to pin the throttle and go full send into the mountain
He was kind of forcing him into the mountain because he got over top of him.
What they were showing from the inserts and what happened, the guy put his throttle all the way up and nothing was happening, and all of a sudden it went to happening and he went to 1,000,000 miles an hour out of nowhere and uncontrollably into a mountain, is they were trying to say that all that smoke was clogging that dude's engines. And basically, like, he wasn't getting any power, and so he, like, full sent it, and then, like, when the smoke got out of his intakes, all of a sudden he had, like, all the power in the world.
All right.
I have no excuse for the action scenes in this movie. Forrester does introspective films on emotionally suppressed characters, often with a focus on duos, like Bond and Camille here. He never did action before, and it feels like an afterthought. Regardless of how well he does it, it still feels like an afterthought. I have no excuse for that. It's the truth. It's like they have to happen. So they just end it to end so we can get back to the human study.
Right.
Now, I can understand if you can't forgive this. For me, for intimate Bond, not spectacle Bond, it's okay. And these broken moments, while egregious, are less than 5% of a movie that is rich with more nuance and depth in the first hour than some entire films before it. After over 40 years, and for the 22nd film, couldn't they do something different just once? You don't have to like this movie, but you should respect it.
Bond movie stepfathers? Hate it, but you will respect. Watch this movie again, you guys. This is such a different type of Bond movie, and it's far and above better than almost all of them.
Bond throws a chute to Camille, who hurriedly puts it on and flings open a door. A Bell 25A joins the fight and lights up Bond's plane, and Bond pulls up to a vertical climb until his literally falling apart plane stalls out. Getting as much height and time as he was able, Bond dives for Camille, and grabbing her, dives out of the plane. They separate, and Bond desperately tries to get back a hold of her. They fall all the way down and into a sinkhole, really more of a crevasse. They grab each other and pull the chute with some 50 feet to spare, if I'm being generous. Double rip, roll credits, they dead. I'm sorry, we'll go scrape them up.
Very little time to slow down.
Cutting to M, as Tanner informs her Bond also killed the Bolivian cops when they found Mathis in his boot. Tanner does offer that there were no witnesses to say otherwise. Tanner is a beacon of trust in this film, but M needs more ammo than that. She goes into the Foreign Secretary's office. He's played by Tim Pickett-Smith. This office was shot at the Reform Club, which stood in as Madonna's Blades Academy in Die Another Day.
Oh, another cameo by a famous building.
M doesn't get through the door before she's chided. What's today's excuse that Bond is legally blind? M is in the shithouse, as the government has aligned with the Americans and their interests. This is a great moment. The Americans are shifty, sure, but his own government? How could he trust them after something like this? It also pushes the elite are the enemy theme.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The Foreign Secretary even echoes the sentiment that if we refuse to do business with villains, there'd be no one left to trade with.
This movie is oddly prescient to today's times. Rich people are the bad guys in this movie, even to the point of the United Western government. Kind of how they are in the world right now. It's like the colonizers are bucking.
The world's running out of resources, and in this mad dash, right or wrong doesn't matter anymore. Ask Russia.
100%.
The Foreign Secretary will let the Americans have Bond put down. So make no mistake, this is self-aware villainous betrayal from the upper government that's meant to protect him. Cutting back to Bond, holy shit, they're alive.
Not only alive, but walking, non-concussed.
Barely scratched.
Right.
Mostly dirty.
A little dirty.
Bond asks Camille what she wants from Green, and she tells him she's after Medrano. Medrano killed her father, raped her mom and sister, and then strangled them while Camille watched. They just smiled at her and burned the house down when they left, explaining her burn scars and setting up a trauma based on fire. Bond realizes he's such a fool. Even on the job, he's been solely focused on finding peace that he ruined her chance to have it, that Green has killed Mathis, and Bond is still a step behind. They also find an underground dam blocking the flow of all of the water for Bolivia. Green isn't after oil. He wants the water. Bond knows that to create the current drought, Green had to have built other dams.
Green is probably the perfect villain in this movie. He's always one step ahead.
It's a great combination of the villain not being an idiot and James Bond being his own worst enemy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We then cut back and forth between Bond and Camille walking to a village, and the village people desperate for water. These scenes were shot in Chile, in the Atacama, the driest desert in the world. Now, choosing Chile to represent Bolivia turned out to be a controversial decision. In the 19th century, a war left Chile with valuable mineral resources and landlocked Bolivia without access to the sea. The resulting wealth of Chile, compared to the poverty of Bolivia, is still a cause of deep resentment. The duo board a Ford bus and ride back into town. They enter the hotel looking mighty dusty, banged, and bloody. The concierge gives Bond a message left by Fields that morning, which reads simply and pointedly, "Run." Bond has Camille wait while he goes up to his room. The music rises as he enters, but finds M. So that's what she meant, Bond sneers. M gets a call from Tanner, saying they have Camille. Bond says it's not her fight, let her go, and M orders it without a second's hesitation. She's here, on the notion of him being a mad dog, but still instinctively trusts him.
Right? Totally trust him.
Without thinking about it, she was like, let her go.
Yep.
How much oil did the Americans promise you? This isn't about oil. Well, that's good, because there isn't any. Bond tries to warn.
Yeah, and nobody listens.
It's about trust, M says, and yup, she's spot on.
Yeah, it's who do you trust?
Hubba, 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 money, 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 who do you trust? Bond looks over and sees something on the bed through the door slats. He bursts in and finds Fields doing her best Masterson, covered in oil. You might want to tell her there's no oil, her lungs are full of it. Bond abandoned her and Mathis at the party and got them both killed, failed to protect them, and she was just an innocent. Look how your charm works, James. They'll do anything for you. How many is that now?
That was pretty cold-blooded of M. She knows the risks. Why would she send Fields? I mean, she knows the risks, right? Send a dude. Am I wrong about this? That would solve 90% of the problem.
I'm going to send a tiny girl that can in no way enforce the things that I'm trying to get her to do.
Right. But yeah, sure, blame Bond for that one.
M suspends Bond pending investigation and has him disarmed and arrested by her guards. They take him to the lift and the doors close. And while they've had issues sticking the landing of some action sequences so far, this isn't one of them. As soon as the door closes, Bond does his best Captain America lift scene before Captain America did it, and with no primer. He headbutts a man as soon as the doors seal. He beats the shit out of 4 dudes with his hands cuffed behind his back. He gets the cuff keys and lets himself out before arming himself and going back upstairs to M. Casually walks up to her and says, "Report that Fields showed true bravery. You and I need to see this out." She says there's a capture or kill order on him, and he shimmies on the outside railing to get away from approaching agents. The last movie was about Bond learning to see the big picture. And with these betrayals, this movie has him learning to look beyond it.
For a guy like him, who's been brought up, molded, love God and country unconditionally, it's got to be kind of,
psyche splitting.
Yes.
M tells Tanner to find out where Bond's going. Tanner says, "Mom, the CIA." And she goes, "I don't give a shit about the CIA or their trumped up evidence. He's my agent and I trust him." Ending this rogue Bond run in less than 2 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah.
Bond walks out of the hotel and a beat up Beetle screeches up and Camille says, "Get in. You gonna try and shoot me?" I said, "Get in." Mirroring the scene where they met. Scene mirroring just happens a lot in this movie. Also, like the Beatles reference, Strawberry Fields' name, and then the Beetle here.
Yes.
We cut to Felix smoking a cigar and listening to Beam be an asshat. Felix answers a phone call as Incan Exportat. Bond says you should just answer the phone, CIA. The taxi driver told him where the office was. Felix sneers for Bond to come over then, and Bond says maybe Felix should get out and see the city. Cutting to a watering hole, Felix approaches Bond and they chat. Bond starts by jibing that America would carve this place up if they could. And Felix takes that as a compliment coming from a Brit. Ooh, shots fired.
Shots fired. That's a burn. You taught us how.
Yeah, I was about to say, we learned it from watching you.
Yeah. I learned it from you, Dad.
Felix tries to boo-hoo act for Bond, but Bond doesn't buy the cynicism. Bond asks Felix how long he's got before he's rushed, and Felix says 30 seconds. Well, that doesn't give us very long now, does it? Bond sternly looks at Felix. Felix breaks and tells him quickly that Medrano and Green are meeting for payoffs at a desert hotel named Perla Las Dunas, or Pearl of the Dunes.
It's a real hotel.
Bond thanks him, and Felix tells him to move his ass as Americans come in and do what we do best. Shoot shit up.
Shoot everything. We'll figure it out.
They lock the place down, but Bond takes out an agent and runs from gunfire. He balcony hops and enters a building across the way. Felix finishes his beer and mopes outside. Beam asks what Felix told Bond, and Felix says, just what we agreed. Crossfade to a lizard establishing shot, then cut to Medrano in the hotel. He's talking to that bastard Carlos, who exposits the hotel runs on extremely combustible hydrogen fuel cells. As just part of small talk.
Yeah, I know. Expository small talk. Oh, and by the way, my house is powered by an extremely flammable gas, so please watch your smoking.
They have a serving girl come in for drink orders, and Medrano just wants to fuck everything, doesn't he?
Medrano is a horny old man.
Wow.
He's a rapist since his early days.
Outside the compound, Camille is reassembling her weapon after the slide was caught. She offers to check Bond's. Bond looks over to see Green's caravan arriving, and he asks her if she's ever killed someone. He can tell by the look in her eyes that she hasn't. He talks her through, like a mini pep talk, but it's more about the connection than the motivation. He knows she can do it. He's preparing her to deal with what comes after.
Absolutely. This is what you can expect from one professional to another.
Inside the hotel, wait, did they drive into the lobby or is this just a bougie-ass parking lot?
I think it's just a bougie-ass parking lot.
It's just a bougie garage, yeah. Regardless, Green enters eating an apple. A cheap Hollywood trick to make someone look like an asshole is to have them eat an apple while doing bad things. Oh, he's so callous.
Really? Is that a cheap Hollywood trick?
They do it all the time. All the time. And once you know it, you'll never unsee it now.
Yeah, well, now I see it quite prevalently through all of the replays in my brain of people eating apples, but yeah.
Medrano and Green meet up, and Green pays off Carlos to bribe the national police before the coup. Everyone wants their slice, just like the foreign secretary said. With his money, Carlos exits, and Medrano wants his payment for his role in Quantum's plan. And wasn't his payment Bolivia? I mean, I guess Green sweetened the deal. No wonder he throws fundraisers.
Dude's just throwing money away.
Medrano has his beer and serving girl sent to his suite. Medrano signs Green's contract to get his money, and then Green immediately presents him with a utilities contract for the water he was just given ownership of. Green is doubling the costs, and Medrano won't sign. Green says, buddy, you remember what we do, right? You'll sign unless you want to wake with your balls in your mouth and your replacement standing over you.
Yeah. I mean, how do you not work with the people who just put you in power?
Do you understand, like, we will put you out of power?
You're on their dick now.
You made a deal with the devil and now you're confused?
You're right. Like, you think you're in charge? Like, do you feel in charge?
As Green threatens Medrano's life, they cut to an insert of Camille rushing the hotel, his real angel of death.
Oh, the movie's filled and laced with nice intercuts. It's fantastic.
Brilliant.
It is.
Medrano signs and is paid. He gets up all salty and heads to his suite. Carlos gets in his car in the garage, and Green starts to head for the garage himself. We see Medrano trying to rape the serving girl, and cut to Bond jumping on Carlos's Rover when he exits the garage. You and I had a mutual friend, Bond screams and headshots Carlos before engaging the other goons. He's killing everyone, John Wick style, before John Wick.
Bond Wick style.
The Rover slams into the building and must have hit some fuel cells because an eighth of the hotel explodes.
Well, there's fuel cells everywhere, apparently.
Everywhere.
Literally everywhere. The weirdest fucking design I've ever imagined in an engineering aspect of how you would fuel something run by hydrogen. But okay, let's roll with it. I rolled with it. I'm not necessarily an engineer.
Who designed this hotel? Frank Lloyd Wrong?
You right?
Bond's pinned down behind a car and shoots the feet out from under some goons before popping up and killing them and Green's driver. Meanwhile, Camille shoots Medrano's guards and knocks one over the railing. Green retreats into the hotel and has Elvis place suicide sentry on the garage entrance. Back with Camille, as she enters Medrano's suite, the serving girl runs and Medrano jumps Camille. He bearpaw smacks her before throwing her onto the bed. Back with Bond, he's approaching Elvis when a cell explodes and takes out the entire lobby area, killing Elvis. The poor guy. But if you thought killing him was the final insult, if you're sharp-eyed, or just slow it down to almost frame by frame, you'll notice a few frames where the shockwave blew his clothes off before the flames consumed him. This Looney Tunes bullshit would have infuriated me with Roger because it would have been obvious and held on. But I watched this like 12 times before I even noticed that. And that's what makes it great.
Yeah.
Like an Easter egg instead of a bad gag.
Yeah.
Elvis, you were the best punching bag. Even Fields beats you up. Rip.
Rip.
Green barely escapes the blast and Bond chases after him. A quarter of the hotel is aflame and the spreading fire ignites more fuel cells. Bond climbs onto the roof to get over the lobby and fires into the skylight to dive in front of Green, who grabbed an iron.
Grabbed an iron?
Yeah, that's what he said when that girl made fun of him.
Oh, that's right. He grabbed an iron.
He beats Bond wildly. I hated this guy, and I didn't buy him as a threat in the day. But he is actually set up well to be one. A mad and wild cornered animal. He sees red and kills people. His choreography isn't refined. It's desperate. And that's actually what makes it believable he could do some damage to Bond. And jumping someone with a pipe isn't a bad way to start a fight with someone bigger than you if you're dirty. That's all I'm saying.
If you're fighting for your life, does it matter?
Exactly what my drill sergeant said. Bond's gun gets knocked away. Dirty Dom switches up for a fire axe. Yeah, if you're in his way and aren't Superman, you're gonna get fucked up, even if he is a scrawny sleazeball.
He's quick.
But the fuel cell explosions are getting closer. Back with Camille, as Medrano has her by the neck against the wall. He says she has the same look of fear as her mother and licks her, so she bites his face and knees him in the nuts, reaching for her gun before she's slammed back into a glass side table for her efforts.
Does this remind you of the Hindenburg? Like, it's just a bad idea.
Oh, the humanity.
Oh, the humanity.
Bond is fighting Green, and even with an axe, Bond seems to be too well trained in defense, blocking or dodging everything when an explosion knocks the catwalk from beneath him. It's like James Kirk all over again.
It is like James Kirk all over again.
Camille grabs the glass she just went through and stabs at Medrano's legs. Bond climbs up the half-fallen walkway and gut kicks a crazed Green just as another cell explodes and sends them flying. Camille stabs Medrano's back. James deflects the axe into Green's foot, causing Green to fall backwards, but Bond grabs the man by his fucking hair.
He needs him alive, and that was the fastest thing to do. Your hair's pretty strong. But I gotta give a shout out to the stuntmen in this scene who willingly let themselves be hurled across rooms. I know there was a lot of pulley work and stuff like that, but a lot of them looked like they were standing on top of the explosion.
Camille kicks Medrano off of her and dives for her weapon. He tells her she'll burn, and we cut to Bond, and then hear the gunshot. Green stabs that it sounds like Bond just lost another one.
I know, everybody wants to rub it in Bond's face. That's why I don't understand why people didn't get it. It was pretty obvious.
The reason I said it like we cut to Bond and then hear the gunshot, there's a reason the film does not let you see her revenge. Because it's pointless, because it's hollow, because it doesn't mean anything, and they don't want you to get anything out of it.
Right.
So you'll get exactly out of it what she got.
Nothing.
Anticlimactic.
Yes.
That's genius.
It is.
Bond drags Green up, and we see the hotel continuing to explode. Camille is trapped in the suite, blocked in by fire. She's frightened. Bond, having ditched Green and not killed him, runs to her. Levels are falling. Everything's burning or exploding. He barely makes it to her before being crushed as above levels crash in front of the doorway, trapping them completely. But he does find her, very obviously gripped by fear from her trauma. She doesn't want to burn to death. Any death is preferable, just not like this. But they're not getting out. Bond scans, but sees nothing but blinding flames. She's basically begging him to kill her before she burns. Bond picks up her weapon, and she repeats the words that he said to her outside, this time more meant as a command to kill her instead of a consolation. Bond kisses her head and steels himself. He's failed another one, and this one will die to flames the way Vesper died to water, and he has to watch again. He cocks the gun and says, close your eyes, causing a flash of fear to wash over her face as she takes a deep breath. But the flames separate, and Bond sees an exposed fuel cell on the wall and shoots it, trusting the smoke to have created enough pressure to force that giant explosion outward, I guess.
I know, since it was tamped on the backside, I thought the same thing. It's like, why didn't that blow up inside? I was like, with the amount of fire, why hadn't that blown up already? It's hydrogen in that container.
But it works. He blows the wall out, and he gets to save one, which he really needed. It's what he wanted without him knowing. He didn't want to kill Vesper's murderers, or he wouldn't have put it after the job like he told himself he was doing. He wanted a chance to save her. They exit the rubble and spot Green limping into the desert. Bond tells Camille to wait there, and we cut to Bond driving Green's 2008 Ford Edge into the desert. This is our third and final boot scene. Bond opens the boot for a third time and throws Green out of it. Green says he told Bond everything about Quantum, and Bond said he'd let him go. Bond points out Quantum would know he ratted and are probably looking for him, so good thing he's in a desert. Bond then tosses a can of motor oil at Green's feet and says he bets Green makes it 20 miles before he considers drinking that. He says goodbye, Mr. Green, and drives off. Having gone back for Camille, they ride into the nearest village and stop. Camille thanks Bond. He asks if she's all right, and she says, almost detached, that she's fine. She keeps thinking Medrano's dead, and she won. Bond immediately gets it and says, well, there's lots to clean up and more coming in after Green, probably. He knows she was left hollow from her vengeance. It was unfulfilling, and she's still left with that void, that all-consuming void. He offers her the only thing he can, and that's to just move forward, focus on the job.
She's lost, unfulfilled, and without purpose.
He realizes that vengeance, it's not only going to not make it better, it might even make it worse, and he's just offering her the only thing he can, and that's just to keep your head up, to not think, to not give yourself a time to think, because that's the only way he's found to deal with it so far. She says it's not a bad idea and asks him if he'll be able to sleep now. Bond stares distantly. I don't think the dead care about vengeance. Learning from her. They kiss, but that's it. She survives the movie and doesn't fuck him. She's a unicorn.
She's a fucking unicorn. I thought the same thing. I was like, she didn't sleep with him and survives. What the hell? The only official Bond girl to make it through.
If you've slept with him, you might make it. If you don't sleep with him, you are probably going to die. This is the first girl to get away with both.
Right.
We crossfade to Kazan, Russia. A man and woman walk to their flat, arm in arm, but Bond's inside with a gun, waiting in the dark. When the man turns on the light and they see Bond, he tells them to sit down, forcefully. Bond gets a real long look of the man that got Vesper killed, and then at the woman he's currently conning. Bond says, you work in Canadian intelligence. It's okay, I know you do, and you have access to very sensitive material. Bond lays out the con and how they'll extort her to give up the docs, and she doesn't want to believe him. Bond points out her love knot and says, beautiful necklace. I have one just like it, and lets Vesper's love knot drop. Bond tells the woman to leave now, call her people, and tell them to check their seals.
I love how she gives a nice little polite thank you as she leaves.
That thank you, that moment was everything to him, was the entire point, was that Quantum of Solace. Roll credits. That thank you is the title of the movie.
Right?
She leaves Bond to kill him, but Bond doesn't kill him. We crossfade to Bond exiting and sending in agents to arrest the man, learning from everything along the way that it wouldn't bring him anything but more pain. He saved the girl from Vesper's fate. He forgave himself and Vesper. He found his Quantum of Solace. M caps the movie by informing Bond that Green was found in the desert with 2 bullets in the back of his skull and a tummy full of oil. But Quantum killed him with guns. Can't sully Bond after he proved a point. We also learn Leiter was promoted and replaced Beam. Bond tells M that she was right about Vesper and excuses himself. As he walks away, she says she needs him back, and he says he never left, throwing Vesper's love knot into the snow and walking off. The dots roll out, and this isn't a glitch. The gun barrel sequence is the last thing we see. Roll credits. For real this time.
For real this time.
This is not a bad movie. It's a great one. I've argued for over 2 hours, and if you can't see that, then nothing will change your mind. Yes, the action can have terrible moments, but that's less than 5% of the film, while 95% of the shortest Bond film ever made has more crammed into it than most before it.
You're not wrong. If Casino Royale wasn't as good as Casino Royale was, this would be the best Bond movie ever made.
If Casino Royale wasn't Casino Royale and people weren't expecting part 2 the way stereotypical sequels were,
right,
they would love this movie a million times more. But it's not Casino Royale all over again, and they hated that.
Right.
I did. I was one of y'all. Everything I say about people who dislike this film, I had every one of your critiques in the beginning.
Yeah.
I just saw it differently as time went on.
Yeah.
I'm giving this movie a B+. They got a character director to dive into Bond's humanity more than the action, and that's okay for once. Hell, I'd argue it's necessary for the weight of Casino Royale to sink in and influence the series moving forward. They could have just moved on to the next adventure, but spending what is essentially the continuation of Casino Royale focused on Bond's humanity and struggles, we understand the gravity of Vesper's loss and while she'll always be a ghost from his past. We wouldn't have gotten any of that foundation if we just gallivanted off on the next popcorn-shoveling junk watch spectacle and paid it no service. It would have devalued Casino Royale retrospectively. And honestly, this movie has all the beats of a Bond film, and the action's not that bad to me. It's just not for everyone. I could go on forever about how the villain and plot are more relevant now than ever, or how every actor dripped nuance. But I've argued long enough.
I don't disagree with you on any of your points. This movie was by far, hands down, the most different Bond movie, while still yet paying homage to all the other Bond movies that came before it. I gave this movie a solid A, because the action scenes didn't bother me at all. I mean, there was a couple of bad editing cues, but that's about it. And overall, it was a very good movie. It was well paced.
For the kill count, how many do you think Bond kills?
I'm gonna say around 10.
16. 15 die by other means for a total of 31. For the pre-title. The pre-title is the first to pick up after the previous film, and I mean by mere minutes. It's a very exciting chase in beautiful or dangerous locales. It sets up recurring themes of the movies and gets the plot immediately rolling. It also has dumb moments like how Bond removes his Aston's door, 6th place.
I really dug this pre-title sequence, and in fact, I think it's my second favorite, so I gave it 2nd place.
For the title, I honestly find the title sequence to be one of, if not the best, visually and thematically, and yet the song is, for me, terrible, and that really dragged it down, 6th place.
I agree with you, 60-40, the graphics were fantastic, and I do like the song, 2nd place.
Moneypenny pickup line. Again, there is no Moneypenny, and will not be until the next mission. These bottom 4 are essentially all tied at no Moneypenny. 4-way tie for 22nd place.
20th place for me.
Q gadgets. Bond has tracking cell phones with Ultra HD cameras in 2008. But he's mostly just got a gun and a quart of oil, though. Where the last film didn't have Q or overly fantastic gadgets, it did have more than a couple, and they were still fictionalized advanced versions. This doesn't really have that outside of his phone. There's nothing to really get excited about from that angle. 20th place.
There are no Q gadgets in this movie, in my opinion. All they had was a phone. 22nd place.
Cars. The 2008 Aston Martin DBS. Just the updated model of the last car. Maybe it looks better to you. Maybe it doesn't. But it's not as exciting or new this time around. And he spends the rest of the movie in rented vehicles and Cammy's tiny cars. 9th place.
I was a little bit harder than you in this category because, yes, we did get a sweet Aston at the very beginning, but we didn't really get a chance to really appreciate it other than that V12 power, which I did appreciate. But then that was it. And then rented cars for the rest of the movie. I give it 19th place.
Main ally. I'm giving this one to Mathis, and it's why I didn't give it to him last time. You could argue Camille was the ally and Fields was the Bond girl, but I consider the main Bond girl to be the one that lives through the film. Mathis dies for Bond, and being his mirror with a forgiving reflection, he once again does whatever Bond needs, and it costs him. I love this character. I love the actor. I love his story and his impact. He's shaped Bond for the rest of the Craig series and had more of an impact than most allies ever will. 1st place. He's really an even more fleshed out version of Zukovsky with an even more tragic ending.
I like Mathis. I like Mathis a lot. Mathis's death in that fucking alley was probably one of the most heartbreaking moments for James Bond as a character that I can imagine him going through. Because at that point, he had a friend, and he asked his friend to come with him on this stupid, unsanctioned job, and his friend got killed and died in his arms. I like Mathis' whole attitude towards his work. I just like Mathis as a character, so I also gave him first place.
Villains. Dominic Green, a slimy owner of utility companies and false philanthropist / conman and quantum operator. Spectre was still tied up by that Chode McClory's estate, so Quantum was the stand-in. Green embodies modern real-life villainy and definitely the most human villain we've ever had. So much of his personality is tied up in hastily concealed micro-expressions that really bring this guy to life. He had a great plan too, very realistic and simple. Get Monopoly, exploit it. 7th place.
Perhaps it's just because of the zeitgeist of the times. I found Dominic Green to be a very effective villain. And yes, his plot was perfect, monopolize the water. Easy enough to do when you have a global cabal of the most powerful people on the planet. So I gave him a 2nd place. I thought he was one of the more realistic, captivating villains that James Bond has seen.
Main Hinch, Elvis. What a lovable loser Elvis was. A toupee-wearing, lurch little brother-looking, neck brace-having punching bag who literally has his clothes blown off of him before dying. If Strawberry Fields can take you down, though, you're beyond ineffective. He's almost more a useless entourage member for Green than a Hinch. A right-hand yes-man, and that's kinda what he is, because that's who rich asshats have in their real-life entourages. 10th place, for having traits I usually complain about and yet making it work. But you are the worst Hinch ever, man.
And I kind of had to rate him as such. Aside from being a walking BlackBerry, he didn't really do much.
It's because in the real world of tech bro villains, they don't have henchmen, they have entourages.
You're right, they have personal assistants. So, I gave him 24th place.
I disagree with you on the value of Elvis tremendously. Bond girl. Camille Montez, a former intelligence operative for the Bolivian Secret Service, now rogue and seeking revenge for the murder of her family by exiled dictator General Medrano. She was portrayed by Ukrainian-French actress and model Olga Kurilenko, and is the only main Bond girl not to sleep with Bond. She is damaged, but capable, a mirror of Bond and a near match for him, but not quite. She's way better than you remember, just not as strong as they'd hoped, and does require saving in the end after all, which kind of backtracks a little in her development to finish Bonds. But hey, it's his movie. 5th place. I love how everyone felt like real humans in this movie.
Oh yeah, no, everybody was realistic in this movie. I thought that Camille was one of the more effective Bond girls around. She didn't fall for Bond's bullshit. She had a mission that she stuck to, and she was pretty much on her game the whole time. I gave her 3rd place.
One-liner. And there's a lot of really good one-liners. Like when Green says his friends call him Dominic and Bond says, I'm sure they do. His wit is dry, but on point and often threatening. But I'm going to have to give it to when M scolds, you killed the man in Bergens, and Bond says, I did my best not to. It's hilarious dark humor. It's messed up. It's 3rd place.
7th place? There were 3 one-liners in here that I thought were perfect, and one was from M, one was from Mathis, and one was from Bond. The Mathis line is when they were getting picked up in London, and she's like, I don't know who you are, and Bond is like, see, they forgot about you already. He's like, you say that just to hurt me.
Locations. Italy, England, Austria, Bolivia, Haiti, and Russia. Bolivia and Haiti were shot at Panama and Chile, and Russia was shot in the UK. They travel around to a lot of places and make effective use of those locales in the story, and add a lot of culture. It does get drab, and while that's offset in the beginning, towards the end, it's a lot of desert brown for a long time. The sets were bomb though, and almost a Damian flair to some of the sets. The location shooting is almost to Skyfall levels of visual overload, but just not quite yet. Surprisingly little focus was actually put on the locations. Like the action, they were an afterthought to the human-driven story, which is okay for this one film that kind of needed to be for what came before and what comes after. Still, 9th place.
For me, the locations were really well done, but it was the set design just knocked it out the park for me in this film. Everything was big, wide open, glass, chrome, shiny. The sets were remarkable.
Mike Wilson said the sets on this film were a postmodern take on modernism, and Daniel Craig promised a return to a Kennedamian flair for this film.
Well, they nailed it. I gave it second place.
Protracted attempt to kill Bond. There really wasn't one, was there? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
21st place, but again, essentially tying the bottom runners with no protracted attempt to kill Bond.
Nah, unless you want to count the airplane attack, which was not really protracted. Yeah, I gave it 20th place.
The mission or plot. Investigate the unknown organization that Mr. White belongs to and had infiltrated MI6, leading to Bond trying to stop the organization from viciously controlling an entire country's water supply, and somewhere along the way find a real way to make peace with yourself. The mission could have been inconsequential and just focused on Bond, but instead it's thematically tangled with everything in this film, like my 3-year-old's hair after falling asleep with a lollipop in her mouth. It's Goldfinger, View to a Kill, and World Is Not Enough all over again, but this time instead of gold, diamonds, or oil, it's water. And throwing up some dams seems far more realistic to me than irradiating an entire sea. First place.
I thought this was one of the more well thought out plots of the whole Bond franchise so far. Most realistic ones. So I give it 5th place.
Damn right.
Damn right. You just wanted to say that. It's fun. I knew you were going to make some sort of damn joke.
Stunts. The stunts are okay. I feel like they tried to do a lot, but unfortunately, no one will argue that they did not showcase any stunt work well in editing. And that's sad, but a fact. 11th place.
I gave this 4th place for stunt work. I felt that between the car chase, the foot race, and the explosions, I felt like the stunt guys put in their work. They deserved a lot of credit. Every stunt that I saw with a body in it was fucking visceral.
That's true. I just wish they got showcased a little bit better.
But I still felt it. And, those dudes earned their money. So, 4th place.
Score.
I really dug the jazzy progression of a Bond song. Thematically, it translated really well. And I think he did a fantastic job. The overall score never took me out of the movie. It was ethereal, kind of electronic, as modern, up-tempo, kind of ethereal. And I dug it. It was pretty good. I give it 4th place.
The score is amazing, calling back when necessary with beats from Vesper's theme. A strong score, but not the best. Standing on its own, but not standing out. 7th place. Movie.
Not just because it's a direct sequel, but 2nd place. This movie was fucking phenomenal. In my opinion, it's one of the better Bond movies they put out of all time. And I'm not just saying that because it is a direct sequel to Casino Royale, but I've watched this movie several times. I've always loved this movie. It's one of my favorite.
This movie deserves a deep dive, a close watch, and then a rewatch or two. Maybe you'll never like it or appreciate it, but it shouldn't be so easily dismissed. There's more meat on the bone than ever. It just came in a package no one accepted, so we all told ourselves we didn't want it. Bond graduates beyond the big picture. Craig is already comfortable in the role, hitting the mark between austere detachment and boyish vulnerability. Bond here is most like the novels, save for the meth and the cigarettes, despite his modern field agent body. Quantum of Solace is more like a 2-act film, with the first act being the 4th from Casino Royale. A perfect continuation that isn't the same movie over again, feeling like a distinct but connected next chapter. 6th place. Probably the most brilliant Bond film of all time, brought down by the biggest what the fuck moments the series can offer as well. If the action was more polished and the editing less 2008, we wouldn't even be debating this movie as number 1 or 2.
No.
And as they said, Bond will return, and so will we. Until then,
I'm Agent Carter.
And I'm Agent Sedgwick.
Stay spying, y'all.